Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We're excited to have you today. This is a special 90-minute webinar. Um, so I'm going to get started so that we can get to the technical content. My name is Erica. I'm part of the team at VMUG that does communities and virtual content. If you're not familiar with VMUG or if this is your first event, welcome. The VMware User Group is an independent global customer-led organization created to maximize members' use of VMware and partner solutions through knowledge sharing, training, collaboration, and events. We encourage everyone to get connected to a local VMUG community near you. You can do that at my.vmug.com. Please use the Q&A function for all the questions today to our presenter, Kyle. He will be answering these questions live and in the question box throughout the webcast. And questions are also recorded. So if you ask something specific, we can make sure to connect you and get that answer to you. And this session entirely is being recorded, and it will be distributed in a wrap-up email following our webcast here today, as well as being posted to YouTube. You can find all future webcasts here, including the VMUG exclusive global virtual event that's happening November 6th. So, and this is also all available at my.vmug.com. We are in person for the next little bit in the fall. So we have Paris and Sydney Explore on Tour stops coming up, as well as Cincinnati and Washington, D.C. user cons and that global virtual event I talked about. So make sure to stay up to date with everything going on. And with that, I'll stop sharing and pass it over to you, Kyle.
All right, thank you. I'm sharing out my screen here. If you can just confirm that you're seeing my screen, my slides.
It looks great. You sound great.
All right, great. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So as Erica mentioned, we do have the Q&A open. Please do ask your questions, post them in the Q&A. I will keep my eye on the Q&A as I go through, and as questions come in, I'll do my best to try and answer. We got 90 minutes, so I anticipate that as we get towards the end, we'll have plenty of time to just go through the Q&A and get any outstanding questions. Hopefully we'll be able to get as many of those as we can, but there will likely be a few we'll miss. So we'll do our best to do that. By way of introduction, my name is Kyle Gleed. I'm part of the Cloud Foundation technical market team here at Broadcom. Been working with Cloud Foundation going back to 2016, 2017, when we first came out with it. So I've been working with Cloud Foundation for a while. And my most recent focus has been on upgrading. And so that's what we're here today to talk about is PaaS to VCF 9. And so as we go through this, we're going to be looking at it from two perspectives. We'll be looking at it from the perspective of an existing vSphere customer who is moving to Cloud Foundation. And then we'll also look at it from the perspective of an existing VCF customer who's moving to VCF 9. You'll see there's a lot of similarities in the two approaches, and there's some nuances, and I'll do my best to call out some of those nuances and also talk about some of the changes that came out with the recent 9.0.1 update, which came out, I think, a week ago yesterday, September 29th or something like that, as there's some significant implications of that update with regards to your upgrade paths. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So we're here to talk about upgrades, talk about upgrade paths. So at a glance, the big question is, what is my upgrade path to 9.0? And I tried to really boil this down to make it as simple as possible. And so we're going to talk about this at a high level, and then we're going to go into details and get into the details in later slides. But at the beginning, if you ask me, what is my upgrade path to VCF 9, I would respond with a question saying, hey, are you a vSphere customer or are you a VCF customer? And let's say you're a vSphere customer. I believe this is going to be the vast majority of us. And if you're a vSphere customer, then I would say, okay, great. So you do have a path to VCF 9. That path is pretty straightforward. However, there is going to be some differences depending on whether or not you are running Aria Operations. Now, we all know that Aria Operations is the old name, and it has been rebranded to VCF Operations. But for purposes of today's discussion, when I'm talking about the pre-upgraded component, I'm going to call it Aria Operations. And then when the post-upgrade, I'm going to call it VCF Operations to kind of help us in that discussion. And so the reason why you're going to ask if, why I'm going to ask if you're an Aria operations, an existing Aria operations customer is because with VCF 9, one of the things that you will realize, or if you're not already aware, is that VCF operations is now a required component, and it needs to be installed. And it is used primarily, well, for a lot of reasons, but one of the more important things is this is how you will license your VCF 9 environment. So it's very important you have Aria operations. So if you do not have Aria operations, that's okay, because what we'll do then is we'll go ahead and our upgrade path will be something like this. We're going to upgrade the vSphere environment to 9, and I'll just kind of point out right now, this upgrade to 9 is it was required with VCF 9.0. With VCF 9.0.1, with that recent update, we can now go directly from vSphere 8 up to VCF without having to do the vSphere upgrade out the gate. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you basically you prepare your vSphere environment, and then we're going to go deploy this new component called the VCF installer, and we will log into the VCF installer and download the component binaries. And then we will basically deploy the VCF and fleet. And you'll notice I got new terminology here, fleet. And so we'll talk a little bit about more what the fleet is and the concept of the fleet. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take that existing vSphere environment that we have prepared, and we're going to converge that into a VCF environment. So to take the existing vSphere environment and converge it into a new VCF environment. And it will basically bring the vSphere environment in pretty much as is. It's that there are some changes that will be applied to the cluster that we identify as the management cluster. There will be some additional components installed. There'll be a resource pool created. But in terms of impact on running workloads, it's really non-intrusive. It's the running workloads are not aware of the changes going on. And so you basically you complete that upgrade, and then when you're done, you'll relicense with VCF 9.0. Okay, so that's the high level overview. Now, what if you are running VCF operations? So if you're running VCF operations, then the follow-on question is, okay, you're running operations, but is that operations a standalone instance of operations, or is it being managed via an Aria Suite lifecycle manager component, the Aria LCM? If it's not being managed by the Aria LCM, then our upgrade path will go a little bit different. You'll see it's very similar, but the first step is to upgrade Aria Ops to VCF Operations 9. So instead of, in the case where we don't have Aria Operations, we're going to deploy it as part of the upgrade. In the case you do have it and it's not managed by Aria LCM, we start by upgrading that to 9.0, and then the path looks the same as before. So you'll see that little nuance there, that if you have Aria Operations, that it's a standalone instance not managed by Aria LCM, then we're just going to go in and manually upgrade operations. Now, what if you are using the Aria LCM? So I am running the Aria LCM together with operations. Again, very similar upgrade path, but you'll notice the difference here is here we can actually use the Aria LCM to orchestrate the upgrade of operations. And as part of that orchestration of the operations upgrade, it will also deploy the new component called the fleet management. So again, here we have the first step is going to be a little bit different, and then the remaining steps remain the same. So again, at a very high level, if you're a vSphere customer, the first question is, are you running Aria operations? If not, then your upgrade path is pretty straightforward. If you are, same upgrade path, but we're going to need to understand if that Aria operations is managed by Aria LCM or not. If it's not, we'll go ahead and upgrade Aria operations manually. If it is, we'll use the Aria LCM to upgrade it. And I'm going to go through these in detail as we get into the presentation. So that's kind of the vSphere side. Now, for the VCF side, similar line of questioning here, because with VCF, you can deploy VCF if you have 5.2 or 5.x. You can upgrade directly from vSphere 8.0 update 1 to VCF 9, or from VCF 5.0 up to VCF 9. So those are the kind of the points. And we do have skip level upgrades. So if you're running VCF 5.0, you can go right to VCF 9. You don't need to jump to 5.1, then to 5.2. And so, but with that, if you're running Aria operations, if you're not running it, then you're basically going to go into the SDC manager and you're just going to basically use the SDC manager to orchestrate the upgrade. You'll upgrade the SDC manager, and then you're going to go in and you're going to manually deploy VCF operations in the VCF fleet management. And then you're going to do some commands to register and configure the operation fleet management. So these two boxes here, we're basically going to require some setup outside the SDC manager, and then we'll go through and wrap things up. And then here again, you'll notice the last step in all these examples is to license VCF. That's because when you do the upgrade, you're going to take that existing environment, which is running on the VCF 8.x with the license keys and multiple license keys, one for vSphere, one for ESX, one for NSX, one for vSIM. And we're going to replace that with the license file that's managed through VCF operations. So getting a little bit ahead of myself, but anyways, so if you're a VCF customer, again, we start with that question about Aria operations, and your upgrade path is going to flow as we see here. If you are using Aria operations, then again, is it a standalone instance or is it managed by the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager? If it's a standalone instance, then again, you're going to start by upgrading operations. And so you'll upgrade operations, you'll manually deploy and register with the fleet manager. And we're going to talk about that fleet manager component coming up. And then we'll go ahead and upgrade SDC manager, upgrade the SDC, and then go through and complete the upgrade. And if you have the vLCM, here again, we're going to use the vLCM to help orchestrate the upgrade of the operations before we turn over to the SDC manager to complete the upgrade. So that's kind of the high level overview. And so if I kind of summarize this slide, there's really your vSphere environment. You're going to want to, the questions I'd have is, well, first of all, are you a vSphere environment or VCF environment? Are you using operations, and is that operations managed by vLCM? Those are the three questions, and depending on how you answer those, we can basically show you what your upgrade path will look like at a high level. Very straightforward, and you'll see there's a lot of similarities in the upgrade path, but there are some nuances, and we'll talk about those as we go through. Okay, so in terms of some recommended practices, so when you're heading into doing an upgrade, so as you may have kind of picked up from that overview slide, we always want to begin the upgrade with operations and operations fleet management. Okay, operations we already talked about. That's how we're going to license our new environment, and it takes on a new role in VCF 9. A lot of the functionality that currently exists in the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, as well as the SDC Manager, is now moved into Aria Operations. And so you're always going to want to begin with operations. That's now a required component. Along with operations, we have this new component called the VCF Operations Fleet Management. So if I was in a room where I could see you all, I'd ask how many of you are familiar with the fleet management and how many of you have heard of this. You may be wondering what exactly is the fleet management. The simplest way to think of this is if you're familiar with the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, this is the new version of the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. But it is no longer a separately managed appliance. It's now built into operations. So it does run as a separate appliance, but the UI is now deprecated, and the UI is now part of a fleet management inside of VCF operations. And so, you'll those two components, and you'll start with those. If you have an existing vLCM and existing operations, as we've seen, you'll always start by upgrading those. And if it's not used, we will deploy those as part of the upgrade. Okay. Before you do the upgrade, and this is something that I it's one of those things that we, even myself, I find myself kind of failing on this number 2 and getting burnt multiple times, but it's always good to go in and verify your vSphere health, your vSAN health, your NSX health, your VCF health. Go in, look for alerts, look for alarms, go in and make sure that everything's healthy. And if there are any issues, do your best to address those before you begin the upgrade. If you have issues, alarms, alerts, or any kind of lingering configuration issues, there's a very good chance that those will manifest themselves during the upgrade as problems. And so if you can address those beforehand, you're going to have a better upgrade experience. The other thing is when if you're verifying the health of those components, you also want to make sure you have the capacity for the new components. So we've already talked about some of the new components that will be deployed, operations if you're not using it, the operations fleet management. There's a new component called the operations collector. If you're not using NSX, it will deploy NSX Manager. And so you will need to make sure you have space to take on these new components. And also when looking at capacity, it's good to look for any unnecessary snapshots and just make sure everything's good there. And then the last thing, as far as a recommendation, is always it's good to go in and look at your certificates and your passwords and make sure that nothing is going to expire or nothing has expired. Sometimes these upgrades can take a fair bit of time. They can span multiple days, if not multiple weeks, different maintenance windows. And you want to make sure that you don't get in the middle of an upgrade and suddenly you're dealing with an expired NSX password or an expired vCenter password or an expired certificate. The last thing here is really kind of a nice way of saying read the release notes and particularly pay attention to deprecated features. If you are using vSphere Update Manager, do note that when you make that move to VCF 9, you will need to transition to vLCM images. So vSphere Update Manager, also known as vLCM baselines, is deprecated, and you will need to make that transition. And you'll make that transition as part of that upgrade to vSphere 9. And also, enhanced link mode. So when taking existing infrastructure and upgrading it to VCF 9, ELM, enhanced link mode, is deprecated. You will need to remove the vCenter from the ELM ring prior to doing the upgrade. Okay, so now this one, I know we got a lot of people on the call here, and I'm sure many of you are probably sitting up in your chair saying, what, ELM's deprecated? What's going on with that? So yes, this is deprecated. It is being replaced with a new feature inside of VCF operations that's a combination of VCF SSO and vCenter linking. So you can still get a single pane of glass with VCF 9.0, and we are continuing to add additional functionality that's available in ELM into operations with future updates. But do be aware that when you make that move, you will need to break out of that ELM ring as part of that upgrade. Okay, so that's kind of the recommended practices. Let me go ahead and just kind of take a quick peek at the Q&A and just see. I see there's a number of questions popping up here. See if I can get some of these, address some of these. So a question about how to migrate VMs from vSphere version 7.8 to VCF 9. So we're actually going to go into that. That's kind of what we're here to talk about. So when it comes to the VMs, we're going to focus on upgrading the infrastructure, upgrading our vCenter servers, our ESX host, our vSphere clusters, and getting them up to a VCF 9. Of course, those VMs will come with it. One thing that hopefully you'll take away from this is that the upgrade is largely transparent to the running VMs. So we will hopefully address that question as we go through the presentation. What would be the recommended process if we are not upgrading, but deploying side by side and migrating VMs from our current environment to the new one? Are the things we need to watch out for? So if you're doing a side by side, you're going to basically deploy a new VCF 9 environment and then migrate your workloads. That's a very popular upgrade approach, and it has a number of benefits. A lot of these upgraded environments, I talk to customers and they have an environment that started out as 5.5, got upgraded to 6.7, upgraded to 7.0, upgraded to 8. Now they're taking it to 9, and they can be running on older hardware. They can have some configuration drift over the different versions, and so it's not to say we can't upgrade it, but there is a sense of comfort that comes from knowing that you have a brand new server with a fresh ESXi install and you're going to deploy fresh. So there are some benefits. There's some reasons why some customers prefer this path. When you do the upgrade, you want to pay attention to your networking. Networking is very important. As you're moving workloads in, are they going to be on the same VLAN? Are they going to cross VLANs? Oftentimes, depending on your network, whether or not you have layer 2 or you need to go router rated 3, you may need to change networking. And so the networking is one thing. Also pay attention to your VMware tools version, your virtual hardware version. Make sure you upgrade those as part of the upgrade as well and address those. And the recommendation I would make here is, we do have cross vCenter vMotion. You do have the ability to just shut things down, copy them over, kind of an offline migration. But we also have HCX. And with VCF 9, everybody's entitled to HCX, and HCX is our migration tool. And you can use HCX to orchestrate the migration of large numbers of VMs with no downtime into VCF 9. So yeah, that's something to to consider there. Let's see. Is there an ETA of the release? So I'm not really sure what you mean by this. VCF 9.0.1 is the latest shipping version of VCF, and it's been out since June, and we just released the 9.0.1 patch at the end of September. And I am talking about the latest shipping release, so it's out. And so if you are asking more specifically about a specific component, please feel free to answer a follow-up question. Is there a rollback? Is there a way to go back? So say if I start the upgrade, I get to VCF 9, I say, you know what, I want to go back to say VVF, or I want to go back to vSphere 8. The answer is no, there is no rollback. If you're thinking about this from a recovery standpoint, I start the upgrade, I have problems, and I need to fall back and get the business back online. We do have a lot of things you can do in terms of backups and restores and checkpointing and snapshotting to basically help make sure that you have a successful upgrade path. But in terms of, the upgrade is a one-way direction. When you upgrade, once you upgrade, there is no going back. Once you upgrade and you get on the latest version, there's no undo button or revert button. If you do have problems during the upgrade, keep in mind that the upgrade is going to be, as you're going to see coming up, it's a number of steps that we go through, and you complete the step, you go to the next step, you complete the step, you go to the next step. If you have a problem, you kind of stop at that point, you resolve the issue, and then you proceed forward. So you should be able to catch any issues before they become insurmountable problems. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Is there a series on vSphere 8 to VVF? VCF, VVF. So VVF is essentially the upgrade path. Believe it or not, from a vSphere 8 environment to a VVF environment is very, very similar to an upgrade path from vSphere 8 to VCF. The difference is going to be in those additional components that get deployed. We have a new component called the VCF installer. Despite the name VCF installer, it also is used to deploy and upgrade VVF environments as well. So what I'm talking about here when I talk about vSphere 8 to VCF 9 upgrade, this very much applies to a vSphere 8 to VVF upgrade path as well. The difference would be in the components that get deployed, as VVF would not have all the components. For example, VVF would not get the NSX, would not get the automation, but it would have the operations and the fleet manager. Or maybe I said fleet manager, it may or may not have the fleet manager. I'd have to double check. But anyways, the upgrade path would be very similar. So can you get the slide decks? Yes, the slide decks are available. I'm not sure how the VMUG plans to distribute them, but yes, these will be available. Let's see. Yeah, lots and lots of questions coming in. Are there any requirements if you want to use a migration tool, such as needing NSX or vSAN? No, there's no requirements. Well, let me slow down on that. So first of all, it depends on how you're doing the migration. So for example, if I want to basically stand up a new environment and migrate VMs over, I can use Cross vCenter or vMotion, in which case there is no requirement for any additional migration tool. But now let's say if I want to migrate workloads and I want to use layer 2 extensions or some of the features available through something like HCX, well then HCX is going to have some requirements on NSX, particularly on the destination. There could be some other requirements as well. So there could be a requirement for migration tools, but note that it depends on the use case. If you don't want to use HCX, then you don't need to use it. If you don't want to use vSAN, you don't need to use it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we come up. There's a question on VxRail, and is there an ETA for releasing VxRail upgrade path? I don't have an ETA. I do know it's a work in progress. At VM Explorer, I do remember talking to some folks and attending some sessions, and they mentioned that we are working very closely with Dell, and it is coming soon is the best I can tell you. So stay tuned on that. Okay, so with that, we've done a lot of questions. Let me go ahead and just jump back into the presentation. And let's go through some examples. So we're going to start, I started at the high level review talking about the vSphere upgrade path, and then we talked about the VCF upgrade path. Recognizing that the majority of you are going to be vSphere, let's focus most of our time on that vSphere upgrade path. So when upgrading vSphere 8 to VCF 9, The upgrade prerequisites. Okay, so vCenter and ESX must be version 9. Now this is actually, okay, so let me kind of slow down here. So you'll notice here on the upgrade prerequisites, I'm calling out VCF 9.0 and 9.0.1, and that's intentional because the requirements did change. So while this is a dot release, an update release, it did change in the sense that this is very important. If you are upgrading to VCF 9.0, so you're basically going to use the VCF 9.0 installer to do the upgrade. You will need to make sure your vCenter and ESXi have been upgraded to version 9, and that upgrade is a manual process. You'll basically go in, manually upgrade vCenter using the ISO, then you go in and you use vLCM to upgrade to ESX clusters to ESX9, and then you go ahead and do your upgrade. Now, if you're VCF 9.0.1, with that .1, we have now relaxed that requirement to manually upgrade to 9. And so now you can upgrade to VCF if you're running vCenter and ESX must be running 8.0 update 1 or above, and NSX must be 4.1 or above. So depending on which version you're upgrading to, the source version where you're coming from is slightly different. And then let's say in this 9.0.1 example, you basically use the you basically stand up VCF using the 8.0 update 1 with NSX 4.1. You would then go into the SDC manager or into the operations lifecycle manager and upgrade those components to 9 using the automation. So it's just that starting state. So again, that subtle change there, we used to always talk about needing to manually upgrade, but with the 9.0.1 patch, we have relaxed that, and you can now do the upgrade after you do that switch to VCF. A note about licensing. So when you are running 8.0 and NSX 4.1, you're using the old licensing. When you do the upgrade, you will continue to use the old licensing, the old license keys, as long as you continue to run 8.x or 4.x. That nothing changes. You only need to relicense once you make that switch to 9.0. Okay. You will need to transition to vLCM images, as I mentioned. You'll need to transition all your clusters to vLCM images. The VOM or the vLCM baselines is deprecated. So you'll need to take care of that before you do your upgrade. And there will be a validation and a set of checks. And if it detects that you are running VUM, it will notify you, and you will need to switch to vLCM images in order to perform the upgrade. And again, as I mentioned, and verify that available capacity for new components. Let's just say you're a vSphere shop, you're running vCenter with ESX, and you don't have any other components. After you do your upgrade, you will have an NSX manager, you will have a VCF operations instance, a VCF operations fleet manager instance, a VCF operations collector, and also a VCF automation. Okay. Now the VCF automation, well, let me just kind of leave it at that. These will be additional components that get deployed. And so the questions usually come, well, where do they get deployed? Well, when you do the upgrade, you will basically identify the vCenter server, and you'll identify the cluster in the vCenter server that will become your default cluster, and those will become your management domain, and that's where these new components will get deployed. Okay. In terms of, those are the prerequisites, requirements. In terms of the considerations, as we already discussed, your path will vary depending upon whether or not you have Aria operations deployed and whether or not it is managed by an instance of the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. The upgrade path is very similar, regardless of your starting state. But again, the sequencing and the ordering, whether or not you're going to manually upgrade Aria operations, whether you can use Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to upgrade operations, or whether you're just going to deploy new components, it will change your path slightly. As I just mentioned, the cluster where vCenter is running will become the default cluster in the VCF management domain. This is where those new components will get deployed. So when you're saying, hey, he says I need available capacity, which cluster? Well, where's your vCenter running? That will become the default cluster, and that's where we will install these additional components. You will need to relicense after the upgrade. So when you do the upgrade, you'll start out, you're fully licensed with your 8.x licenses. Following the upgrade, you will be running in evaluation mode. You will have 90 days to then register your VCF operations with the Business Services Console, get your license file, and relicense your environment. Again, vCenter cannot be in enhanced link mode, so you'll need to manually take it out. Now, in terms of guardrails and limitations, things like, hey, what can I have in my inventory? Can I have LACP coexist? what are my networking latency requirements? Can I have standalone host in the inventory? What's the minimum size? All those details, those are things that they are documented in the documentation. I don't call them out on the slides because from experience, one thing I've found is I do these presentations, I call out these limitations, somebody comes back 6 months from now, watches the recording, and then they reach out to me saying, hey, you said this, but the documentation says this. We are constantly updating the docs. We're constantly revising these values. So rather than call them out here, I'm just going to point to the documentation. But do be aware, we have done a lot of work with VCF 9 to add coexistence with some of the configurations that maybe weren't supported in the past. So for example, if you have LACP in your environment, we can coexist with LACP. vSAN stretch clusters, we can import vSAN stretch clusters. We have support for non-vSAN storage topologies for the management domain as well as for the workload domains. The minimum cluster sizing will vary depending upon whether you're doing a remote cluster, whether you're doing a cluster in the data center. So all those details are there, and they're all covered in the documentation. Okay, quick time check here. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to get to more Q&A here in a moment, but let me wrap up with a couple more slides. So we talked a lot about your upgrade path. We talked about the Aria Suite and the implications of upgrading from the Aria Suite to VCF 9, particularly around the fact that if you are running the Aria Suite today, and by the Aria Suite, I'm talking primarily about the Aria Suite lifecycle, the Aria operations, Aria automation. If you are running those components, you will start by updating the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to version 8.18 patch 2. Okay, so that may seem like a kind of an odd thing to point out. If you're running Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, you need to apply this patch. What this patch does is it brings in the VCF 9 awareness. So once you patch the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to 8.18 patch 2, it then has the awareness to be able to download the update bundles for the operations, as well as the install bundles for the fleet manager. And that's how you can orchestrate the upgrade from the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. If you are not running the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, again, you'll need to update Aria Operation to VCF 9. When you are deploying VCF, if you have an existing instance of operations, existing instance of automation, you can import those as part of the upgrade. After you've done the upgrade, you can then go in and you can add Aria automation, Aria operations for networks into the environment and upgrade them as a day 2 operation. So we use this term converge. When we talk about converging, we talk about taking existing infrastructure and basically using that to build the VCF management domain. So we can converge the vSphere environment, the operations environment. Then after we've converged that, we've instantiated the VCF management domain. We can then go in and we can go into Aria Suite, the Aria operations under Fleet Manager, and we can import existing automation and operations for networks, and we can then upgrade those as well. So we do have that support. Do be aware a couple limitations. There's no upgrade path from Aria logs to VCF logs. So if you're running Aria logs today and you're wondering what about those, what you would do is when you upgrade to VCF 9, you'll deploy a new instance of logs using VCF logs, the newer version, and you'll run them in parallel until such time as you no longer need the older logs. Then you can then switch over to the new logs. And also, if you're using the vSphere Identity Manager, VIDM, it's typically used with Aria Automation for identity management. It can also be used with NSX and other components. But if you're using VIDM, it is replaced by VIDB with VCF 9. So when you do your upgrade, the VIDM will continue to run, and you continue to use it, but there will be a new component called VIDB that you'll need to transition over to after the upgrade. Okay, so some limitations that we'll talk about, and then I'll get to some more Q&A here. Some notable limitations when you're upgrading. You notice I use the word converging. So converging is basically anytime we're taking an existing environment and upgrading it. The vCenter server, again, cannot be enhanced link mode, and we cannot be VxRail managed. So to the question earlier about, hey, when is that path for VxRail to VCF 9 going to come? That's something we're working on. But those are the two kind of primary limitations. And again, as I pointed out, starting with VCF 9.0.1, you can now upgrade environments that are registered with VMware NSX. So with 9.0, this was a limitation. You could not upgrade an environment registered with NSX, but with 9.0.1, we have added that. The NSX must be running version 4.1.0.2 or above. And again, this is only applicable for VCF 9.0.1 and above. Okay, so let's go back and let's see if I can just take a couple more questions here before we get into an actual demo showing what the upgrade path will look like. So what would be the recommended process if we're not upgrading but deploying side-by-side migration, the VMs from the current environment to the new one? Okay, so I already talked about that. So essentially, if you're not upgrading but you're going to deploy side-by-side, you just need to migrate those VMs in. In terms of how you do that, there's a number of different ways. You can use cross vCenter vMotion. You can use HCX, as I mentioned. The big thing I would recommend to you is when you're doing this, you're coming from doing a migration. You're coming from an old version to a new version. You're just going to move those VMs. Do remember to pay attention to your VMware Tools version, your virtual hardware version, as well as your networking. And just, as you move those VMs, identify, do you need to do a tools upgrade? Do you need to do a hardware upgrade? Oftentimes that can require some reboots. And then are you going to change IP addresses or are you going to basically keep the same subnet, same VLAN? HCX can help you. It can facilitate that and reduce the downtime, as well as some of the new capabilities inside of VCF, such as VPCs and the ability to create virtual networks through VCF networking can also help you extend those networks and to help with that migration as well. After upgrading the Aria automation to VCF automation, all three nodes get 2 IPs each of the new nodes. Let me see. So this is basically a question about how the IP addressing is done on the Aria automation nodes. So yeah, I'm not really I'm not sure I can answer this question in the sense of, yes, when we do the upgrade, one thing I haven't mentioned so far that we probably should mention is when you deploy Cloud Foundation, there are now 2 modes that you can deploy. There's a simple mode and there's a high availability mode. When you deploy, and essentially what this refers to is the footprint. When I deploy with the simple mode, I'm going to deploy single node instances of all appliances. So I get a single node of NSX, I get a single vCenter server, a single node of operations, a single node of automation. Of course, every node will require an IP address. And then in the case of things like NSX automation, there will be additional IPs required because of they use virtual IPs. So that in the future, when you scale them out from a single node to 3 nodes, it can have that virtual IP, which is registered in DNS, which everybody's pointing to. So you can basically add nodes in the back end without having to change your NSX IP address, for example. In addition to that, we also ask for additional IP addresses that are used during upgrades. And so as part of an upgrade, we might stand up a new appliance using a temporary IP address, copy its configuration over, and then change the IP addressing. So you'll typically see it when you're deploying. It will ask for additional IP addresses. It might ask for 4 IP addresses, even though it only needs 3. Well, that 4th IP address is to help facilitate that maintenance. So in terms of your question, in terms of the, if you deploy, I was talking about the simple mode and the single node. If you deploy in high availability mode, the high availability mode is more for production kind of deployment where you need lots additional high availability as well as scale. And to do that, we always deploy with 3 NSX manager nodes, 2 NSX operations node, maybe 3, as well 3 VCF automation nodes. And so when you deploy those, it does require an IP address for each node, and there's that virtual IP. And then there's also going to be that requirement for that maintenance IP. So that might be what you're asking about is why do they need those extra IPs? And hopefully that will help answer that question. So you're on, if you're on vSphere 7, ready to go to 8, okay, it's a question about licensing. So if you're running RAR, should we install operations version 8 or 9? Okay, so so essentially the way I take this question is you're running vSphere 7, you're getting ready to go to vSphere 8. and you're asking, should I deploy VCF Operations 9 or should I deploy Aria Operations 8.18? I would deploy VCF Operations 9. I'd go ahead and make that move to VCF 9 as quick as possible. Keep in mind that you can manage vSphere 8.x from vCenter 9.0 as well as from operations. In that case, you will continue to use the old license keys for the 8 environment, and you can continue to manage the 8.x environment from the VCF. That backwards compatibility is there, and then you will need to relicense once you switch over to 9. But that's only when you upgrade the vCenter and ESX host to 9. So the short answer is I would definitely start by deploying version 9, as many of the components as you can, and then orchestrate your upgrade for the 8.x products to 9 over time. If I have an existing environment with NSX and Aria operations, which approach we have to follow to upgrade? Okay, so if you have an existing environment that is running NSX, you'll basically go in and you'll want to upgrade to VCF 9.0.1. And again, that patch has the ability to basically take that existing vCenter and that existing the vCenter inventory together with the NSX 4.1.0.2 and converge those into a VCF management domain. And then you can use the SDDC manager then to upgrade those 8.x and 4.1 components up to VCF 9.0. So hopefully that answers that question. Are the VCF SSO and vCenter linking features already available to leverage in the latest release of VCF? Okay, so VCF SSO and vCenter linking, yes, those are available in VCF 9.0 and above. I use it in my lab. It gives me that single pane of glass and a single authentication, so I can log in once and I can bounce between the different UIs without having to relog in again. I can see all my vCenter servers in the same vSphere client. So that functionality is there. Just be aware that not all of the ELM functionality, such as the replication of tags and stuff, is there yet. So there is some feature lag between ELM and the vCenter linking, but the core capabilities are there in the product right now with VCF 9. Okay. So there's a comment about, I mentioned largely transparent to the running VMs. What would not be transparent? So the only effect on running VMs would potentially be load-based type things. If I have a vCenter server and say it's a highly utilized vCenter server, and I'm going to be going in and doing an upgrade, and say I have some VMs running in the environment, or vSphere cluster would probably be a better example. If I do anything that's going to trigger a lot of load on that cluster, such as putting hosts into maintenance mode, evacuating VMs with vMotion, that could, depending on how much capacity and resources are available, that could introduce a load, which could maybe cause a slight degradation in performance, for example, that may, in a worst case scenario, be noticeable. Those are the types of impacts that you might expect to see on a running workload. But for the most part, the VM is not aware of the fact that it's being vMotioned. It's not aware of the fact that the ESXi host is being updated. It's not aware of the fact that it's now moved to a host that was 8, it is 9. So it is transparent. But because you are, in fact, in an upgrade scenario, you are migrating VMs, you are doing vMotion, DRS, things like that, just be aware that in an environment that is resource constrained, some of these activities could potentially cause a little bit of lag or some lag on those that could be affecting those VMs. So that's kind of what I mean by largely transparent. So I like to say it's fully transparent, but I am aware of those corner cases where some people don't put host in maintenance mode in the middle of the day because of its impact on the workloads. They wait till the weekends or the evenings because they have their utilization is such that they don't have the free capacity to be able to do that without disrupting workloads. Those types of environments, would want to be aware of that. Are VMs created by vSphere 7 and 8 compatible with VCF 9? Yes, I'm not exactly sure of the backwards compatibility, but the virtual hardware version that I've mentioned a few times, you want to make sure that as you upgrade any virtual machines you have that are older, you want to check that virtual hardware and make sure that's supported on the newer version. But the newer version, typically we do support at least the current version and 2 versions back. But again, refer to the documentation. But yes, those VMs are supported. You may need to do some upgrades components of the virtual hardware in order to bring them in, but there should be no issues with doing that. And again, if you use something like HCX, it can kind of facilitate that because HCX can actually help orchestrate the upgrade of the tools and the hardware version as part of that upgrade. All right, so lots of questions coming in. Let me go ahead and let's get back to the presentation and let's go through an upgrade path. And so here I'm going to actually show you 3 scenarios. So here I have the 3 scenarios listed here. I got a vSphere environment with no other components running, just vSphere. So I got vCenter, ESX, and may or may not have vSAN. That's our upgrade. That's scenario number 1. And so for this customer, here I have an example of what the upgrade path will look like. And so what does this upgrade path look like? Well, the first thing we're going to need to do in that vSphere environment is make sure we're running on vLCM images. So we haven't already transitioned to vLCM images. We will need to do that. And then we'll go in and we'll need to upgrade to vSphere 9. Now I have this little asterisk here next to vSphere 9, noting that starting with VCF 9.01, it's no longer required to upgrade to vSphere 9. But you will need to be at least vSphere version 8.0 update 1 and above. So you want to make sure your vSphere version matches the required minimum version. So everywhere you see the upgrade to vSphere 9, just keep in mind that with the 9.01, it's upgrade to version 8.0 update 1 or above. Okay. And then you'll deploy the new component called the VCF installer. This is an OVA that you download from the Broadcom software portal. You'll download it, you'll install it. It deploys as a simple OVA. Then once you download it, you'll register it with a depot and you'll download the VCF binaries. So if anybody is familiar with the old Cloud Builder appliance that we had with VMware Cloud Foundation, this was, excuse me, this was played a similar role in a sense. It was an appliance that would do the automated deployment for the software-defined stack, the vSphere, vCenter, NSX, vSIM. We have moved that into the VCF installer, and this VCF installer, despite the name VCF installer, it is used to deploy both VVF and VCF. And one of the key differences here is where the Cloud Builder was around 30 gigabytes in size, the VCF installer is only about 2 gigabytes in size. And the reason why it's significantly smaller is because we don't include the binaries with the VCF installer. As such, once you deploy the VCF installer, you need to go in and download the binaries as a second, after you deployed it. And you do that by setting up a depot. We have support for both an online depot as well as an offline depot. So if you're not connected to the internet, we can set up a local web server and use that as an offline depot. Okay, once you've done that, you'll go in and you'll use the VCF installer to basically orchestrate the upgrade. So you'll basically go in the VCF installer, you'll say, I want to deploy VCF. You will converge your vCenter because you have an existing vCenter environment. And then it will deploy the operations collector and the operations instance and the operations collector. It will deploy the fleet management. Remember those additional components I talked about. It will deploy NSX. And again, when it deploys these, it will ask us if we're doing a simple deployment or a high availability deployment. And so the number of components that we deploy would depend on how we answer that question. It will then deploy or configure the SDDC manager appliance, and then it will optionally deploy VCF automation. I say optionally because there is a checkbox that you can check to basically skip the automation deployment and move that out as a day 2 operation. But essentially that's your upgrade path. And once you're done, you'll be running in evaluation mode. So we'll then go in and we'll use VCF operations to relicense the environment. And then we can move on to our post-upgrade activities, such as migrating workloads, deploying logs, reconfiguring the VIDB, configuring VCF SSO, enabling vCenter linking, things like that. So that's kind of the upgrade path. So as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward. There's 6 high-level steps. The big ones here is to make sure you meet the required versions, but essentially you're going to deploy the installer, you're going to download the binaries and use the installer to orchestrate the upgrade, and then you'll relicense when you're done. Okay, and so as we've seen in the very beginning, the upgrade path can vary depending on if you have operations. So what if I have operations? So as you see, a very similar upgrade path, but here your starting point changes because we start by first upgrading ops to version 9.0. So we're going to upgrade the Aria operations to VCF operations 9.0. To do that, we're going to go out, we're going to download a pack file, which is an upgrade file, and we'll go in and just upgrade operations. And then from there, you'll see it's very similar. We're going to make sure we're running images. We're going to make sure we meet the minimum requirements, deploy the installer, download the binaries. Now here, On step 6, it's also another change because in addition to converging that vCenter, we have an existing vCenter, it's also going to converge VCF operations. So instead of deploying a new operations, it's basically going to converge that existing VCF operations. It will then go ahead and proceed as we've seen before. It'll deploy the fleet management and the operations collector, deploy NSX, configure the SDC manager, and deploy automation. And so I kind of got ahead of myself there with the slides, but you can see it will go through. Okay, so that's the second scenario. Now the third scenario is when I have the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager together with Aria Operations. Now I could have additional Aria Suite components listed here, but for sake of brevity and to kind of keep the slides manageable, I've left those off. But those would basically be brought in as a post-upgrade activity and upgraded after the upgrade. But essentially here, the difference here is because I have the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, I'm going to start by applying that patch 2 to the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. And again, what does that patch do? That patch gives the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager the awareness of VCF 9, so I can now use the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to upgrade ops, and it will also deploy the fleet management appliance. So whether deploying the fleet management was part of the installer, here in this example, we've moved it up. It's part of the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. Then once that's done, we'll go ahead and we'll make sure our vSphere environment is using images and it's at the required versions. We'll deploy the VCF installer. Here I've added an additional step, and this is just kind of a reminder that when you upgrade your vSphere environment, do keep in mind that there is a version associated with the vSphere distributed switch. There's also a version associated with your vSAN disk, and so it's always good to upgrade those as well. So I didn't show those on the other slides, but that is something to consider as well. But we'll deploy the VCF installer, download the binaries, and then we use the VCF installer to do the upgrade. Now here, because we've already have operations, we already have the fleet manager, it's basically going to converge vCenter, VCF operations, and it will also converge that fleet manager. It will then deploy the collector, deploy NSX, configure SDC manager, deploy automation, relicense, and move on to your post-upgrade activities. So as you see, it's pretty straightforward in the sense that it's very similar for all three scenarios. And I think most of us will fall in one of these three scenarios. But the upgrade path is very similar. The key differences here is that starting state and what you upgrade first and what you manually upgrade versus what you let the different components upgrade. Okay, so that takes us to the point where I want to do a demo. And so for this demo, I'm actually going to walk through and do an actual environment that I have in a lab. This is a recorded demo, and I'm going to show what that upgrade path looks like. So this is my upgrade demo. You'll see we're using a tool called the iSim. This is interactive simulation, and this iSim is available for you to use as well. It has notes down here that you can follow, and it has these orange boxes which kind of help you navigate through the demo. But I'm going to kind of skip all that, and I'm just going to jump into full screen mode, and I'm going to go click through the demo and show you. So in this demo, we're going to go through and show how to upgrade a vSphere environment that's running with the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager and Aria Operations to VCF 9. Okay, so we're going to basically start the demo by going into the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. So here I'm logged into Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, and if I kind of look at the version, we can see that I am running version 8.18. So what was the first step to upgrade when you have in this environment? It was to apply the patch 2. So to apply the patch 2, I'll go down here to settings, I'll go to system patches, and I'm going to apply the patch. Now here's patch 2. Now, of course, what's not captured in the demo here is I did have to upload this patch to the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager and import it. And then once I did that, it shows up here as an available patch. So I'm going to apply this patch, and I'm going to install it. Do note that when you install the patch, it will automatically reboot the appliance. That caught me by surprise when I did it. But then once it's rebooted, I can log back in. Now, if I come back here and I go to the About, we can see I am running patch 2. Okay, so what that patch does is it brings the VCF 9.0 awareness. Now I can use the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to upgrade my ops and deploy my fleet management. So to do that, I'm going to go in here to my environments. And you'll see here I have an environment called Draper. And if I go to the details, you'll see I have currently an instance of logs. It's running 8.18 and operations. It's running 8.18. Okay. Now the logs, there's no upgrade path, so we're going to leave that there. And keep in mind that the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager will continue to run as well. So after we're done with the upgrade, those components will remain and continue to be used until such time as you can transition off those. But what I need to do now is I need to upgrade operations to version 9. Okay, and so to upgrade operations to version 9, because I'm running 8.18 patch 2, you'll see it has the awareness. I've already staged the upgrade package here, so it already knows about that. And I'll go ahead and I've specified whether I'm doing VCF or VVF. This basically applies to licensing and what features get enabled. And then I can do a brief assessment. And the assessment is just basically go out and do a quick set of checks to make sure that the environment, we didn't find any glaring issues that can prevent a successful upgrade. Okay. And so we specify whether we want to take a snapshot and whether we want to retain that snapshot. And you'll see I'm just using the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to complete the upgrade. Provide the networking details. Actually, I jumped ahead here because here under infrastructure, you'll see that it's asking me for the vCenter, the data center, the storage. And so you may be asking, why is it asking for this information? Well, the reason it's asking for this information is because we're going to deploy a new component called the Fleet Manager. And it's basically asking which vCenter are you going to deploy this to, which type of storage you're going to use, what networking you're going to use. And so I have to provide that information because as part of this operations upgrade, it's automatically going to be deploying this fleet management appliance. Okay, so that's a little self thing you want to make sure you check. Verify your networking. And then once we verify the networking, we go ahead and we run a more extensive pre-check. Now, the first pre-check was just a very quick scan. This one's more involved. This one takes a few minutes to complete. And you'll see here, it gives me a summary. I do have a warning. And if I expand this out, you'll see it'll give me details about the warning. It's basically telling me that my lab is undersized. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore that warning because this is a lab environment. But you want to make sure everything's passed. And this kind of, again, gets into that recommendation. If you have any issues here, do your best to resolve those issues because in my experience, ignoring issues like warnings and stuff most likely is going to manifest itself later on as a problem of some sort. So the sooner you can address it, the better. Okay, and so we go ahead and we just go ahead and review the configuration and click submit. Okay, and you'll see we'll go through. There's going to be a total of 13 steps here. We're going to jump forward and again, as part of we're upgrading operations, but as part of this, it's actually going to deploy that OVF template. So if I come back over here to my vCenter, you'll see it's actually deploying this new component called the Fleet Manager, and it will power that back on. Okay, and so then we come here, we see the upgrade is now complete. Now, if I come back here to my Environments tab under Draper, you'll notice that operations is gone. As part of this upgrade, the operations was that fleet management appliance was deployed and operations was re-registered with that fleet management because it's now running 9.0. And as such, it was deregistered from the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. Okay, whoops. And so if we come in here to the operations, and now this is that upgraded operations, VCF ops, and we're going to log in. And this is running operations version 9.0. because we just completed the upgrade. And you'll see here we have this new section called Fleet Management. And again, that fleet management is tied to that fleet management appliance. Okay, so so the next step in the demo, so let me come back here to the slide here and just kind of we can follow along as we go. So what we've just done is we just upgraded that Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to 8.18 patch 2, and then we use the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to upgrade ops and deploy that fleet management appliance. Okay, so now in this environment, I'm already running vLCM images, so I'm going to show that, and so now I'm going to actually go through and do the upgrade to vSphere 9. And so if we go back to the demo, so here to upgrade vCenter, I just basically went in and I just downloaded the vCenter ISO. And I just basically do the upgrade. Now the upgrade is going to be a 2-stage upgrade. I'm not going to show you the upgrade for the sake of time, and many of you have probably done more vCenter upgrades than I have and know more about it than I do. But essentially what it does is stands up a new vCenter server appliance with a temporary IP address, copies the configuration over, reconfigures it, and then it will ask you for the time you want to do the switch. And when you do the switch, it shuts down the old vCenter server, brings the networking, the IP over to the new vCenter, and brings it up as the upgraded vCenter. So here we're going to basically, the upgrade's complete, stage 2 is complete. And so if we close this out, and now if we come back in here and we log back into our vCenter, we can see that we now have our upgraded vCenter 9 instance. We also have that old version, which is left behind, and that's left behind as a recovery point. So once I'm confident that the upgrade is complete, I can delete this old version, but that is going to complete the upgrade of my vCenter server. Okay. And so the other part of this is to upgrade my vSphere host. So here I've got 4 nodes in the cluster, cluster 01, and I'm going to use vLCM to do that update as well. So I'm going to go in here to vLCM, and you'll see right now it's assigned 8.0 update 2 image, and I need to update it to 9.0. So in order to do that, I need to create an image profile. So I go to Lifecycle Manager, and here under Software Depot, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import my 9.0 depot. Okay, and so this is just showing how I'm going to upgrade that vSphere cluster to 9.0. So I go out, I download that 9.0 depot, I import that, and now I can create an image. So after I've imported it, you'll see it shows up here as 9.0. I can go into the image library where I can create an image, give it a name, specify 9.0, and then do a quick validation and save. And now with that done, in order to perform the upgrade, I simply come back here to my updates tab where I basically go in and edit my image. And I'm basically going to say, hey, instead of being 8.0 update 2, I want these all to be 9.0. It will go in and basically check and say, hey, nobody matches because nobody's running the right version. 4 hosts are non-compliant. So I can go ahead now and just remediate the cluster. And here again, I'm just doing a vSphere upgrade, just showing how it's going to go through, and it will take each host in turn, put it into maintenance mode, upgrade it, reboot it, and then go on to the next host. And so it'll just take a few minutes to complete the upgrade here. And I'm just going to click through it here in this demo. Okay, so now that I've completed the upgrade, you'll see I click on the cluster, and you'll see the go to the summary tab, it's running 9.0. So my ESX hosts are all running 9.0. So if we come back to the slide here, we've completed that step. So now the next step is to upgrade vSAN, our VDS, and then deploy the VCF installer. So we come over here. I don't recall if I don't think I showed the vSAN VDS upgrade in this demo. So here, what we're going to do now is we're going to go and we're going to deploy an OVF template. And here we're just basically go in and we're going to upload the VCF installer. Now you'll notice here, if you look at these list of files, there's not a VCF installer listed. That is because the VCF installer is a service that runs on the SDDC Manager appliance. So I'm actually going to deploy an instance of the SDDC Manager appliance to get the VCF installer. And I'm going to name this the SDDC Manager because something I didn't mention is that as part of the upgrade, what will happen is because the VCF installer is running on the management cluster, it will go ahead and reconfigure that into the SDDC Manager as part of the upgrade. Okay, so I'm going to name it with that end state in mind. And I'm going to go ahead and just deploy it. And it deploys, and again, a little confusing because the name is SDDC Manager, but its role is the VCF installer. Once I deploy it, I can go ahead and power it on. And then once it's powered on, I can now go out and connect, and now I'm able to connect to the URL. And here you'll see I've connected to the SDDC Manager, but it is running in what we call VCF installer mode. That's the default mode. And again, it's a service that runs on that same OVA. And I'll go ahead and log in, and this is my VCF installer. Okay, so now if I come back here, I've deployed the installer, so now I'm going to download the VCF binaries. Okay, so to download the VCF binaries, we set up a depot. There are 2 types of depots. There's the online depot, and there's the offline depot. So if you're connected to the internet, and whether it be through a proxy or just straight connection, you can configure that here. If you're not connected to the internet, you can set up a local web server to act as your offline depot. The connected is the easiest because all you have to do is provide your download token and authenticate. It will go out, authenticate, and once it's authenticated, you'll see down below, it now lists all the available binaries. So with all the available binaries, I can go in and I can now download those to the VCF installer. Okay. And so with the binaries downloaded, we can go back and now we're ready to proceed with deploying VCF. So now we've completed this step. So now we're moving into the VCF installer. And the VCF installer is basically going to orchestrate the upgrade of our environment. We've done all the prerequisites. Now we're ready to go in and do the upgrade. So if we come back here, I'm going to go to the deployment wizard. I'm going to say I'm deploying VMware Cloud Foundation. I went through that pretty quickly, but you'll see here, again, VCF installer is used to deploy both VCF and VVF. So keep in mind, same installer. It's going to ask me if I want to deploy a new fleet or an existing fleet. So let's take a minute and let's introduce this concept of a VCF fleet. So essentially, historically, we've looked at the software-defined data center as being two kind of separate components. There's the SDDC stack, which is our vCenter, our ESX host, our NSX, our vSAN, which is kind of that core infrastructure. Then there's the management layer, which is our operations, our automation, our logs. Okay, and so we have these two kind of separate layers, and we bring them together and we deploy VCF. With VCF 9, what we've done is we've taken that management stack and we now call that the fleet. So if you look at the fleet, everything in blue here, operations and automation, those are the fleet level components. In addition to operations automation, of course, operations has the fleet manager, has the collector, but those are our fleet level components. Within the fleet, I can have multiple VCF instances registered with the same instance of VCF automation, the same instance of operations. So the way I deploy my first environment, I'm going to instantiate operations, instantiate automation, and my first VCF instance that instantiates my fleet. Now, as I want to scale and I want to deploy additional components, I would then add additional VCF instances to that existing fleet, which is this second option over here. Now, because I'm a vSphere environment, I don't yet have VCF instantiated. I start by first deploying a VCF fleet. So I'm going to leave that option, come in here, click continue. And I'm going to go ahead and if I had any existing components I want to use, I would select that here. So if I had an existing VCF operations, I would select that. And I do in this example because we just upgraded it to version 9. And then I have an existing vSphere environment that I just upgraded to 9 as well. So I select that as well. So I'm basically saying rather than deploy new components, I want you to take existing components that are already running in my data center and use these to build this VCF management domain and this VCF fleet. And so I'm going to go ahead and take those components, and it's going to ask for some general information. Here's where you see that deployment model. Remember that simple and high availability that I talked about? So remember the simple model is single nodes, high availability is going to be 3 nodes for the NSX manager, the operations, and the automation. Okay. Go ahead and here, because we're taking an existing VCF operations, rather than ask me for information about how to deploy a new one, it's going to ask me for information how to connect to the existing one. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to that. I'm going to acknowledge the thumbprint and I got the right server. And it's going to go ahead and say, okay, here's your operations. Now, hey, I detected this operations instance is already connected with the fleet manager instance. So it's going to ask me for the password for that fleet manager. And then it's also going to ask me to deploy a new operations collector. So again, those additional components that get deployed. So here we already have the operations and the fleet manager. They were deployed and upgraded as part of the LCM, using LCM. Now that we're doing the installer, it's going to deploy that third component, the operations collector. Okay, and so we'll need to manage that, acknowledge the thumbprint for that fleet manager. Now we get into VCF automation. Now here I don't have an existing VCF automation, so I'm going to deploy a new one. Now notice this checkbox. This is that checkbox I mentioned where if I don't want to deploy VCF automation at this time, I could select this checkbox and it would skip deploying VCF automation. I can then go in and do it as a day 2 operation after I've upgraded to VCF 9. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and deploy an instance of the appliance. To the question earlier about the IP addresses that are needed, so here I'm going to give it a fully qualified domain name and assign a password, and I'm going to give it an IP address. Because I'm doing the simple deployment, it requires a single IP address. But then I have to provide a second IP address. This is that IP address that's used for maintenance. So even though it's a single appliance, I'm assigning 2 IP addresses. And then the node name prefix is going to be the prefix it's going to use when it deploys the VMs for the VM name, and then the internal cluster CIDR that's used internally for automation. Okay, so then I go in and now I'm going to configure the vCenter. And again, because I have an existing vCenter, it asks me for the login credentials as well as the SSO credentials, the fully qualified domain name and the SSO credentials to connect to it. Asks me to verify the thumbprint. And here I'm going to deploy a new instance of NSX Manager. Because I chose a simple deployment, it's going to deploy a single node. So I deploy that information along with its corresponding passwords. There's some information here about setting up overlay and doing some of the networking. We're going to skip over that for the sake of time. And so we'll go ahead and proceed. And here, this blue box is what I was referring to earlier when I mentioned that when I deployed the VCF installer, you'll remember I downloaded the SDC Manager appliance and I named it the SDC Manager. And the reason why I did that is because as part of the deployment, it's going to recognize that the VCF installer is running on the same cluster as the management domain. As such, rather than deploy a second appliance, it's going to basically reconfigure that existing appliance into the SDC Manager. So here it's just basically asking me to provide the password to make sure I got the right SDC Manager appliance. I can go ahead and review. Now notice here in the review, I got a summary and I can also view it in JSON view, and I can also download the JSON spec. So if any of you are going to be doing a lot of VCF deployments and you would like to use the API and you like to basically just pass in a JSON, this is how you can get that JSON spec that you can then go in and edit and pass into the VCF installer using API calls to automate the deployment of VCF as well. So we'll go ahead and we'll just kind of do a quick review of all of our configuration, and we'll click next. It will do a validation. This validation is pretty extensive. It will go through and validate the environment. It usually takes about 10 minutes to complete. You will notice I do have a couple of warnings. Warnings are things you can acknowledge and you can proceed. If you get an error, it will stop you. You'll need to fix the error. I went ahead and I got these warnings. I just wanted to point out what these warnings are about. So this first one is basically saying that I can't check compatibility. This is a limitation of my lab environment and the not having internet access. So we'll go ahead and skip that one. And this last one is basically saying that, hey, it detected some standard switches in the environment. And so basically, it's just more of a recommendation to make sure everything's on VDS. You can go ahead and proceed with standard switches. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and acknowledge both those. And once I acknowledge those, the deploy option becomes available, and I can now go ahead and do the deployment. And so now you'll see it's going to convert the existing vCenter into a new VCF instance, deploy the NSX, and configure the SDC Manager, and go ahead and configure the fleet management, operations, and deploy automation. So basically, this process took probably about 2 to 3 hours, if I remember correctly, to complete the upgrade. And remember, as part of the upgrade, it's deploying new components, doing new configuration. And so that's kind of where we're at there. And so now that we've done that, I can go ahead, I can view the summary of all the tasks that have been performed. And again, this is all automated for me. And while this is all going on, it was non-intrusive to any of those running workloads. If there was a problem, it would have errored here, and I would see what the error is. I can go and view the details. I could fix it, and there will be an option to go in and resume the workflow. But now that I've completed the upgrade, I'm now running VCF 9. Let's go ahead and log into VCF operations. Okay, and so VCF operations, we've seen this earlier, where we have the new fleet management. And going to the inventory, we can see that we now have our VCF domain with our management vCenter server. And if we log into our vSphere environment, you'll see here, this is my inventory. And you'll see I had 4 VMs running. I left those alone. I have my logs instance together with my Aria LCM. Those were not upgraded, but those continue to run the older version, and they continue to run in the environment unaffected by the upgrade. I have my old vCenter server that I can delete. And then I have my operations, which is upgraded. I have my new fleet management, and I have my collector. Where's my collector at? Oh, that's inside the resource pool. It did create this resource pool, and it moved the automation instance, the management collector, as well as the vCenter and the SDC manager into that resource pool. But this is my upgraded 9 environment, and you'll see here that it's telling me that I have expired licenses. That's because everything's on evaluation, and I will need to go in and proceed with licensing. So if we come back here, you can see that I have completed the upgrade, so I'll do the license and I can move on. All right, so that is a quick demo of what the upgrade experience will look like. Obviously, that's pre-recorded and it's a pretty straightforward from a demo standpoint. In reality, it does take a fair bit of time. If I come back here and I just kind of go over how long it actually takes, it takes about 2 hours to upgrade vSphere. It takes about an hour to well, it takes about 2 hours to upgrade vSphere. It takes about 2 hours to deploy. It took about 40 minutes to upgrade operations. So you'll see this is something that's a multi-hour approach. It did take a fair bit of time where the demo made it look very quick. I was able to skip ahead. So it is a somewhat time-consuming process. I like to point out that when it comes to upgrades to vSphere 9, we're the turtle, not the hare. And sometimes it's good to be slow and steady as opposed to be quick and so yeah, so let's go ahead now and let's go back and I know we have a lot of questions out there, and let's take the last 15 minutes and let me just kind of go through and answer as many of the questions as I can, any of the outstanding questions out there. Let's see, what happens to LCM after 9.0 upgrade? Does it go away? So as I mentioned, the Aria LCM, so if we come back here to our demo, this Aria LCM component continues to run, and it continues to manage the Aria logs. It continues to manage the VIDM, and it continues to be out there, and it'll stay out there as long as you need it. It's unaffected by the upgrade. And then when does it go away? It goes away whenever you no longer need it. So whenever you transition off VIDM over to VIDB, whenever you replace the logs with a VCF 9 logs through Fleet Manager, and you no longer need it, then you can go in and shut it down and delete it. So thank you for that question. So vSphere equals vCenter plus ESX host. Is that correct? Yes. So when if you go back to the old days, a little bit of a history lesson here, we had virtual infrastructure back in the 3.5 days, and we renamed it to vSphere in the 4.0 days. And vSphere is a combination of two things. It's a combination of vCenter plus your ESX host. Nowadays, fast forward 15 years, 20 years, a lot of people use vSphere, just kind of generic term to refer to both either vCenter or ESX. But yes, from a technical standpoint, the vSphere is a combination of vCenter plus ESX. So when I talk about upgrading vSphere, I'm talking about upgrading the vCenter and then upgrading the ESX host. Can you deploy in simple mode and then later upgrade HA mode? Yes. So I can go in, I can deploy simple mode, which is what we have here, single instance of automation, a single instance of NSX manager, a single instance of operations, and then I can transition this to high availability mode. The way I would do that is I'd log into operations and I would basically expand that cluster. I'd log into automation, I'd expand that cluster. I'd log into the NSX manager, I'd expand that cluster. So it's done by component basis, but you can start in the simple mode and you can then switch to the high availability mode later on. Does VCF 9.01 support VxRail? I don't know. You'll have to check with Dell and their support to understand what is supported and when it's supported. I have not heard of an announcement about VxRail support for VCF 9 yet, but that's not to say that I don't know. I'm not in the loop, so best I can advise there is to check with your Dell counterparts to see when that's going to become available. So my screen's jumping around here. Let me close out as many of these as I can to kind of help. Okay, during the upgrade of VCF, it mentions deploying NSX. Is this if your environment uses NSX, and if not, is it not deployed? Okay, so NSX is always deployed when you go to VCF 9. If it's not deployed, it will be deployed. If you already have an existing NSX instance, you can bring it in as an existing component, and again, that requires that 9.0.1 patch. One note I'll make about the NSX is while NSX must be deployed, there will be an NSX manager and it will be deployed in the management domain. That is not to say you have to change your networking. There's no requirement for you to use overlay networking. There's no requirement for you to go and change any of your existing networking. The fact that the NSX manager will be deployed and be available to you does not mean you have to go in and start automatically changing the way you do networking. So yes, it is a required component, but it's not required for you to start consuming it right away. And what the benefit of having NSX in there, the reason why we install it and the benefit of having it is because it opens up a lot of the new capabilities around software-defined networking, VPCs, the multi-tenancy, and a lot of the new capabilities being built into VCF automation are all tied to the software-defined networking capabilities provided by VCF, which are powered by NSX. So it's definitely something that will need to be in the environment, but you choose at your discretion when you start taking on those new components and when you make any changes. Why is iSCSI not available as a primary storage in VCF? Primary storage types, when we talk about deploying VCF, we support vSAN, of course, we support VMFS on Fiber Channel, and we support NFS. iSCSI is not supported, and the short answer is simply because we have not added the intelligence into the VCF installer and into our automation in order to set up the CHAP and the handshaking and all the things that are needed for iSCSI. So that continues to be a roadmap item. I don't have any insight as to when or if it will become available. One thing I can say is when you converge an existing environment, if you have iSCSI in that environment, you can converge that into VCF. Just be aware that when you use the SDC manager, when you use VCF operations and you do those day 2 operations like adding hosts and expanding clusters, they will not be aware of the iSCSI, so there will be some manual operations you'll need there. But you are correct, iSCSI is not listed, and it's essentially just it's a roadmap item, and it's going to require engineering effort to add support, and it just hasn't been done yet. All right, okay, so there's a question here about what if I have vSphere plus LCM plus Aria plus NSX, what would be the upgrade path? So the upgrade path would be very similar to what I showed. Again, the reason why the slides don't depict NSX is because they were built on 9.0, and we didn't have support for upgrading with NSX, vSphere environments with NSX until the 9.0.1 patch. So that just came out last week. So we do have to do some work to update our slides and our materials. But again, the only difference would be there is if you have NSX, it would ask you, you would basically select the checkbox to add NSX, and it would basically converge that in as part of your the upgrade path. So very similar. Does NSX deploy with VVF as well? No, NSX is only with VCF. If you have VVF, you will not get NSX deployed. Okay. Do you have to be using vSAN either before or after the upgrade? No, you do not need to be using vSAN with VCF 9.0. That's both before as well as after. So in previous versions of VCF, we did require vSAN, but with 9.0, we have relaxed that requirement, and so vSAN is optional. Let's see. A question about vVols and are they supported? So vVols are deprecated. So you want to check the release notes and work with your partner or your account team to understand the status of vVols. I personally don't have any experience with vVols, and I can't really comment. And it's not something that I've used or not something I've worked with. So, but I do know that it was announced as deprecated. In the VCF 9, and so you want to make sure you get the latest updates in terms of how long it will continue to be supported, what's available with VCF 9 and 9.0.1. So hopefully that will help you. Can we run stretch clusters with 12 host NSX, ARIA ops, and ops and AO logs? Do we need to use SDC or SDS? Okay, that's kind of a loaded question. Let me try and answer it this way. So first of all, yes, you can use stretch clusters with VCF 9. You can converge or import stretch clusters with VCF 9, and you can use stretch clusters with NSX. I think the most of those things you're asking in that question are available. Now, in terms of some of the details around nuances around how that works, I would recommend if you have that environment, you can reach out to PSO and get some help with architecting and charting out that upgrade path, as there will be some additional considerations that will need to be accounted for, is particularly because you have fault domains with availability zones, you're using vSAN stretch clusters, how is your networking laid out, or there's a lot of additional considerations that obviously I can't cover in these simple scenarios, but they can definitely help provide guidance on that. There's a question about running in an air-gapped environment and any information we can provide for customers running in air-gapped environments. So remember, we do not need internet connectivity to run VCF. The primary component is the depot and how you get the VCF binaries. We have support for both online and offline depots. The offline depots are for the disconnected sites. Excuse me. Once you have to, once you make that decision and you get those binaries in, there's really no requirement for you to be connected. So it's pretty much the same, but I imagine there are additional considerations in terms of how to do patching and things like that. I'm not aware of any documentation per se that focuses specifically on that. But I just will kind of let you know that it is, if you are disconnected and you have concerns, just do know that we do have a lot of customers who are running in disconnected mode. It is something that we do support and we do work with. So, reach out with any concerns or follow-up questions, and we can do our best to answer those. Will link mode be provided in 9.0? So remember, enhanced link mode is deprecated. It is going away. When exactly it will go away, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know, but it is being replaced with a new feature called vCenter, VCF operations, vCenter linking. So today, if you look at enhanced link mode, it's got a couple of things it does. That single pane of glass is probably the most popular, but it also has some tie-ins with doing some tag replication and some tie-ins with doing some replication of roles and role-based access. Not all that functionality is built into the new vCenter linking. So that's why we will continue to have ELM until such time as we get full feature parity with the vCenter linking. But the ELM, as you know it, is gone with VCF 9. It is replaced by the vCenter linking in VCF operations. In terms of when we'll actually fully remove the enhanced link mode, you'd have to talk to product manager. I'm not sure exactly what that timeline looks like. Let's see, we got about 4 more minutes. I don't know if there's I'm going through these questions as fast as I can. I apologize for the kind of bouncing around, but I'm just trying to get to as many of them as we can. Let's see. Can we deploy private AI on VCF 5.2.2 and want to migrate to 9.0.1? So private AI was available in VCF 5.2. And so if you're running private AI, you can deploy that on 5.2, and then you can upgrade to 9.0 at a future point in time. That's another upgrade scenario that I would need to go back and kind of look at to understand the nuances of that. But essentially, if you are somebody who are running vSphere, you want to move to VCF, but for whatever reason, you are not ready to go to VCF 9.0. Your company has a policy they don't run .0 products, or they need to let things incubate for a period of time before they adopt them. But you don't want to put off your move to VCF. From our standpoint, we've always kind of messaged to our customers that the path to VCF 9 starts with VCF 5.2. So if you are not ready for VCF 9, do upgrade to VCF 5.2 and use that as your starting point. So upgrade to 5.2 today. That will keep you on vSphere 8 and will keep you running with your current licensing. And then you can basically put in place a plan to move or to upgrade from VCF 5.2 to VCF 9 at a future point in time. And that includes any services that you'd be running on top of that. So I think we're getting close to the end. A couple more questions and we'll wrap this up. So it's a question about the upgrade path from ESX 7.0. As you've seen in the demos, I've gone through the path from vSphere to VCF 9 starts at 8.0 update 1. So any 7.x environments will need to be upgraded to 8.0 update 1 or above before they can then be upgraded to VCF 9.0. And above. So if you do have those older environments, you will need to do kind of a two-staged upgrade in the sense that you'll need to get those 7.x environments upgraded to 8.x, and then when you're on 8.x, you'll be able to go to 9.0. So hopefully that will answer your question. So there's a question here about if I have VCF 5.2 and we're moving. I'm not sure I understand the question. So the question essentially is I'm on VCF 5.2. Do I need NSX? And the reason why I kind of hesitate is because VCF has always required NSX. You need NSX for any version of VCF. So if you're running VCF 5.2, NSX is a required component. If you're running vSphere 8.x, then NSX obviously is not a required component until such time as you move to VCF 9. At that time, NSX does become a required component. You will need to install it. But again, I'll just reiterate that while you do need to install, there's no requirement for you to go in and to change your networking. You don't have to switch your VDS settings. You don't have to switch away from your VLAN back networking. You can continue to do your networking just as you have. That would just be an additional appliance running in your inventory. And with that additional appliance, you will introduce new capabilities, and you can start looking at and exploring those new capabilities. And then at a time when you are ready, you can start adopting some of the new software-defined networking capabilities, such as virtual private clouds, distributed gateways, distributed routing, firewalling, etc. And with that, I think we're at the time here. And so I apologize for the questions I wasn't able to get to, but I think we got through a lot of the questions. Hopefully you found this presentation beneficial. We didn't really get a lot of time to focus on the VCF 5.x to VCF 9 upgrade paths, but it's very similar to what we've seen before, where basically the difference here is instead of using the VCF installer, we'll use the SDDC manager. But I'm just going to jump forward here to the end. Let's see if I have okay, I don't have a resources slide. I apologize. I thought there was a resource slide I was going to jump forward to. But with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and we'll go ahead and then turn it back over to the VMUG team. Thank you for your time. Thank you for attending. Hope you found this beneficial. I know it's a lot to sit through for 90 minutes, but I thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Kyle. That was incredible. And I think you may have broken our record for most questions. So thank you for being a resource to us here at VMUG. We do appreciate that. So just a couple housekeeping items. This session was recorded. The recording will be distributed in a wrap-up email following this webcast and a stream on YouTube at the VMUG channel. There will be a survey when you close out of here. If you do fill that out, that really helps us to bring fresh, relevant content like the one we had today. So please fill that out. It's just about 8 questions and it helps us plan for the future. And then if you're interested in upgrading to VMUG Advantage, which is the VMUG paid membership, you can use the code community for 10% off. And I have a slide with the different benefits for our free membership and our paid membership. It includes vDefend and Avi Load Balancer. And then if you get certified, it does include personal use licenses. And that's that QR code. Thank you all so much. I do appreciate it. Again, sorry if we didn't get to your question, but I know that Kyle really tried and he answered a lot. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Talk to you guys later.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thank you.